Good morning, friends. I'm Dr. Rahul Deshpande, Medical Director of HVSI Hospital, Plastic Consultant. I'll be dealing with today's talk is about the evaluation and management of ptosis.
I would like to introduce Dr. Rahul Deshpande sir. He is a medical director at PBMS HV Desai Eye Hospital, Pune, as well as he is presently Secretary of Maharashtra chapter of ISMICS. He has done fellowship in comprehensive ophthalmology as well as fellowship in oculoplasty with low vision training at LV Prasad Eye Institute, Hyderabad. He has numerous publications in many national as well as international journals. Also, he is a reviewer of many journals like Oman Journal of Ophthalmology, Middle East African Journal of Ophthalmology, Journal of Clinical Ophthalmology, Journal of International Ophthalmology, and Journal of Clinical Ophthalmology and Research, which is reviewed by Maharashtra Ophthalmic Society.
Now, as you all know, the ptosis is basically the drooping of the upper eyelid. Now, it can happen because of some congenital problem in the muscle that is known as a simple congenital ptosis. It can be because of the acquired conditions like myogenic ptosis, the muscular problem, then the aponeurotic ptosis because of the aging. The aponeurosis gets weakened, and that's why it produces the weakening in the aponeurosis. The neurogenic because of certain brain tumors or the diabetic cause or a hypertensive cause wherever the vascular supply to the nerve is affected, that leads to neurological ptosis, or a mechanical ptosis, any eyelid mass or a tumor of the eyelid mechanically bringing down the lid and giving rise to mechanical ptosis. The congenital ptosis can be also a complicated form in which it could be in a syndrome of a blepharophimosis syndrome or a synkinetic ptosis. The ptosis should also be separated from the conditions like pseudotosis, in which the dermatocallosis, the ipsilateral hypotropia, enophthalmos, broad-ptosis, double elevator palsy, contralateral lid retraction, and contralateral exophthalmos. So these conditions are in true sense not ptosis, but they may mimic the condition like a ptosis. So you should not get confused whether you are dealing with a ptosis or not. You have to categorically differentiate and separate all these conditions and come to conclusion that the patient is having pseudotosis and in true sense not ptosis, and the treatment of the appropriate pseudotosis condition depends on the cause. Now, the cause of ptosis, lack of lid support giving rise to ptosis, the contralateral lid retraction, ipsilateral hypotropia, these are all sort of the broad-ptosis, dermatocallosis. This is the photograph of the pseudotosis and mimicking conditions of ptosis. In clinical evaluation, history is very important, and clinical examination and decision making. So whether we have to operate or not, whether which type of surgery is required, or whether surgery is contraindicated. So this sort of a clinical assessment is very important in managing cases of ptosis. In history, age of onset, course, whether the ptosis is stationary, improving, worsening, diurnal variation, then variation with the movement or with the fatigueness. So that is also important. Change with the jaw movement, whether there is any change in the position of the eyelid, degree of eyelid closure during sleep, a history of trauma or any previous ocular surgery done in past, history of muscular fatigueness, history of strabismus or visual field defects, and other diseases like medical conditions or family history. These are all important part as to know whether which type of ptosis we are dealing with. So all this history is very important in order to come into some conclusion. Then the causes of pseudotosis we have already dealt. Then clinical assessment is the head posture, the frontalis overaction, lid crease, levator exclusions, this MRD1 value, MRD2 values, this is a marginal reflex distance values. Then the palpebral fissure height, palpebral fissure width, Bell's phenomenon, jaw winking phenomenon, corneal sensation, pupillary reaction, extraocular muscle movements, and fundus evaluation. So in clinical examination, apart from doing routine eye examination like testing vision, testing intraocular pressure, doing ocular movements, checking the anterior segment with the slit lamp and all, in ptosis cases, these all specific examination is required in order to know which type of ptosis we are dealing with. Now, clinical assessment, always you see for the abnormal head posture and frontalis overaction. So this will give some idea about which type of ptosis you are dealing with. So these measurements are very important, like marginal reflex distance 1, marginal reflex distance 2, MRD plus MRD 1 plus 2 gives the palpebral fissure height, palpebral fissure width. So corneal diameter, how much it is, normally it covers 2 millimeter of cornea up superiorly. So we have to differentiate whether what are the measurements and which type of ptosis you are dealing with. Marginal reflex distance, MRD values. So MRD, that is in mild ptosis, it is up to 2 millimeter of the droop, moderate ptosis 3 millimeter, and severe ptosis more than 4 millimeters. Then the measurement of LPS, that is the levator palpebral superioris, which is the muscle of the which is present in the upper eyelid, which is responsible for the lifting of the eyelid. Now the reflex levator muscle of function, normal function is whenever you in the primary position, you tell the patient to just look in the extreme up gaze. Then the lifting of the lid from the primary position to the extreme up gaze, that movement of the eyelid is recorded with the scale or with the caliper, and that gives you the value of the levator function. Normal levator function is more than 15 millimeters. Sometimes if in good patients, you get it in the healthy patients up to 18 millimeters. Good function is up to 12 to 15 millimeters. Levator function is good. Fair function is between 5 to 11 millimeters is the fair function, and less than 5, that is 4 millimeter or less, is having a poor levator function. So in all patients of ptosis, assessment of levator function is must. Assessment of levator function depending on the grading. So 15 millimeters normal or to 18 millimeters, 12 to 14 millimeters good function, 5 to 11 millimeters fair, and less than 5 millimeter poor. So this chart represents the grading of the ptosis depending on the levator function muscle assessment. Vertical fissure height is also an important component. It is the distance between the upper and the lower lid margin. Normally upper lid margin rests about 2 millimeter below the upper limbus. Normal lower lid margin rests 1 millimeter above the lower limbus. Amount of unilateral ptosis is determined by the comparison of the two. That will give you the degree of the ptosis. Grading of the ptosis is done depending on it is mild, moderate, or severe type of ptosis. If it is a less than 2 millimeter difference, then it is a mild type of ptosis. Up to 3 millimeters is a moderate, and a difference of greater than 4 millimeters is a severe type of ptosis. Bell's phenomenon is very important part or a component which we have to do in clinical assessment in every ptosis case, because surgery depends on that. If patient is having a poor Bell's phenomenon, then the LPS resection and all we will be able to do, but post-operatively the results will fail because we are going to opacifying the cornea or having a corneal exposure. So in order to know whether how is the Bell's phenomenon, in certain conditions Bell's phenomenon is poor. So in those cases, medical management is done in cases of ptosis, depending on how much Bell's phenomenon is there. Then Marcus gun or jaw winking phenomenon in synkinetic ptosis, with the movement of the jaws with muscles of mastication and movement and chewing movements, the alteration in the upper eyelid is there. So it accounts to 5% of all congenital cases of the ptosis. Retracts or wing of the ptotic lid in conjunction with the stimulation of the ipsilateral pterygoid muscle. So in all congenital cases, you have to do the jaw winking test in order to rule out the synkinetic ptosis. Corneal examination is also very important. Slit lamp examination of the cornea, corneal staining, corneal sensations. So all these sort of things are very important before going to planning for ptosis surgery. Because in a compromised cornea, one should not attempt doing ptosis surgery, because post-operatively, again, you are going to increase the exposure keratitis, and that problem is going to face. Fundus examination is must in all cases of ptosis, because you may not know a case of a tumor is coming to you with ptosis, you are doing evaluation and forgetting what is happening in the eye. So a patient with optic disc edema or disc swelling can be there and the cause of the ptosis can be a neurogenic ptosis. So fundus evaluation will tell you the idea of which type of ptosis you are dealing with. So fundus evaluation is a must in all cases of ptosis. Ocular motility, as like fundus examination, motility is also important in all cases. So ocular motility may be restricted in certain sort of ptosis where it may be due to neurogenic third nerve or chronic progressive external ophthalmoplegias, where along with the ocular motility, you may have ptosis. So all these tests are to be done in all patients. Pupillary examination is also important in all cases because abnormal pupil will tell you that you are dealing with some neurogenic ptosis or Horner syndrome or some other sort of a problem that may complicate your ptosis. So pupillary examination is essential component in all evaluations of ptosis. A third nerve palsy, again, elderly patient coming to you with some history of diplopia and later on coming with drooping of the eyelid and having a diabetes, and also you have to know the clinical suspicion that try to see the ocular movements, try to see the pupillary reactions, do the extraocular movements, try to know which all muscles are affected in order to come to conclusion as to dealing with the third nerve palsy. It may be complete third nerve palsy, or it may be in a regeneration, or it may be in the improving stage. Causes of third nerve palsy, as you all know, is idiopathic, vascular cause, aneurysm cause, or some sort of intracranial tumors that can give rise to third nerve palsies and give rise to ptosis. Aberrant regeneration is common in trauma, aneurysms, third nerve palsies. Then pseudo-Van Graaff phenomenon, elevation of the eyelid on down gaze fibers of the inferior rectus go on with the levator pulposus superioris. Horner syndrome also is caused by oculosympathetic palsy. You have to also know how the Horner syndrome clinically looks like and the type of the ptosis you get in it. So normal pupillary reaction, slight elevation of the lower lid. Then the iris pattern, of course, some iris hypochromia or the congenital problems with the iris also are the diagnostic of Horner syndrome. And phenylephrine works well in these cases. If you put a drop of phenylephrine, then because of the sympathetic thing, the ptosis will get relieved. So that is a positive sign in dealing with the Horner syndrome. So then this is a diagrammatic representation of the third nerve. I will not go in more details of it. So myasthenia gravis, of course, the ptosis, which is presenting in the middle-aged patients, particularly in females. Again, myasthenia gravis is more common and affecting young females. And investigations, hydrophonium test, electromyography, or simple ISPAC test is also very important in dealing with the myasthenia gravis. Ocular myasthenia. In ocular myasthenia is indicious, bilateral but symmetrical, worsen with fatigue. So whenever after movements or in the evening again the ptosis is worsening, so that is a more pathognomic of the ocular myasthenia. And in extreme upgaze, ptotic lid may show twitching and hop signs. Intermediate and usually vertical. ISPAC test is a useful diagnostic OPD test which we can employ in patients in the middle-aged group females which are coming with the sudden onset ptosis, and that ptosis is worsening in the evening. So we can rule out myasthenia. Again, we have to do the hydrophonium test, and the hydrophonium test we can do in these patients. After injecting hydrophonium, the ptosis is relieved. And the repetitive nerve stimulation test, this is done by the neurologist. Again, it can diagnose myasthenia gravis and ocular myasthenia, and we can come to know the cause of the ptosis by doing repeated nerve stimulation test that the cause is the myasthenia gravis, and we have to manage this case medically. Myotonia dystrophy is again a muscular problem where because of the muscle wasting, involvement of tongue, pharyngeal muscles and other ophthalmoplegias, you get ptosis and the ocular movements are also affected. Such patients, again, you have to refer to neurologists for further management and do only the medical treatment in managing ptosis. The ocular myopathies, again, in conditions like Kearns-Sayre syndrome, pigmentary retinopathies, these all can manifest in form of ptosis and along with ophthalmoplegia. And again, the treatment is medical in all these cases because the Bell's phenomenon is not there, exposure problem is there, ocular motility problem is there. Just merely correcting the eyelid defect may not cure the condition, and it may worsen the condition. In fact, and the simple congenital ptosis develops because of some dystrophy in the levator muscle, occasionally associated with weakness of the superior rectus, unilateral or bilateral ptosis of varying severity. So what is pathognomic sign of a simple congenital ptosis is that in the downgaze, ptotic eyelid is slightly higher. So that is more diagnostic of it. When you tell to a patient to look down, the eyelid, the ptotic eyelid is higher, slightly higher. Frequent absence of the lid crease will tell you that it is a severe type of a simple congenital ptosis. Usually good to poor levator function is associated with it. In blepharophimosis syndrome is a rare congenital disorder, dominant inheritance, moderate to severe symmetrical ptosis bilateral, short horizontal palpebral aperture. Patient will be having with a telecanthus, epicanthal inversion, lateral inferior ectropion may be associated, poorly developed nasal bridge, and hypoplasia of the superior orbital rim. So we have to differentiate patients of blepharophimosis syndrome because treatment deals with the correction of the telecanthus and correction of the ptosis in these cases. Aponeurotic ptosis, of course, it is there in the elderly patients who are having the muscle weakness because of the aging. There is a weakness in the aponeurosis, and you have to clinically diagnose because you will not get the clear-cut margin or clear-cut wrinkling in the eyelid. Then the mechanical ptosis, because of the mechanical problems like the eyelid trauma or the hematoma in the eyelid, a tumor of the eyelid, a hemangioma of the eyelid, or severe eyelid edema, patient not able to open the eyelid. These are all the causes of the mechanical ptosis. Mechanical ptosis, you have to diagnose, and the treatment of mechanical ptosis is different depending on the correction of the eyelid cause. Then the ptosis is relieved. The non-surgical treatment works in many patients. Is the simple ptotic crutch, is a specially designed spectacle where at the you have a ptotic crutch where it lifts the eyelid mechanically, and you wear the spectacle, and the patient is relieved of the ptosis. So this is a simple non-surgical management of ptosis. In many cases where ptosis surgery is contraindicated, you can give ptotic crutch to patient, and patient is will be relieved by the problem of ptosis. Surgical options are fascinella servats, levator resection, levator aponeurosis repair, and frontalis sling procedures depending on the cause of the ptosis. And the two important parameters which will tell you that which type of surgery we have to employ is, first is the degree of the ptosis or the amount of the ptosis, and second is the levator function, how much is the levator function. Depending on these two parameters, you can plan or you can go to which type of surgery you want to do with the patients. Goals of the ptosis surgery is basically recreate newly perfect anatomical results, elevate the position of the lid, create a lid fold if necessary, special attention to the counter and symmetry of the lids. Fascinella servat procedure is done for minimal ptosis, 2 mm ptosis, levator function better than 10 mm. Basically what we are doing in fascinella servat is tarso-mullarectomy is done, an excision of the upper border of tarsus, lower border of Muller's muscles, and the overlying conjunctiva, and the ptosis is relieved. In fascinella servats, these are the results. Preoperatively, it is done for the minimal ptosis, and postoperatively, we are getting good results by doing fascinella servats. Levator resection. Levator resection, it is indicated for any ptosis provided the levator function is better or good, better than 5 mm. Levator resection is the most commonly procedure done. Everbush method, anterior approach, is commonly done. Of course, nowadays surgeons are also, because of some cosmetic things and all, are now going for the Blaskowitz procedure, where you are taking incision through the conjunctiva. So what you do in levator resection is shortening of the levator muscle. So the amount of the levator resection is there specific formula or some calculation by the levator function. If it is good, 16 to 17 mm resection will suffice. Fair, 18 to 22 mm of levator resection will suffice. If it is a poor levator function, up to 22 to 24 mm of levator resection has to be done. So these are the photographs of some pre and post-op of the cases of the ptosis where levator resection is done in patients, having gratifying results post-operatively. Of course, the Bell's phenomenon, if it is good, then you are comfortable because you may not get post-operative corneal exposure in these patients. Frontalis sling procedure is done whenever you are dealing with a ptosis of having a poor levator function, less than 4 mm. Marcus gun or jaw winking ptosis, blepharophimosis ptosis, third nerve palsy ptosis because of the third nerve palsy after giving adequate sufficient time for recovery and consultation with neurologist. If it is not recovering, then we have to resort or we have to lift the eyelid mechanically by the sling material, and this is tarsofrontalis sling procedure. So these are the results preoperatively and postoperative results of the patient photographs of showing the gratifying results of doing a tarsofrontalis sling in patients. So thank you. Thank you for patiently hearing the talk of the ptosis. Still, the talk is more like some complications of ptosis. In further parts, we will be dealing with the complication and management of the ptosis surgery.